Welcome back to another episode of The Social Web TV, the internet TV show that answers the question, who owns your data? With these two simple words, by God, you do!
That was like 4.
All right.
Wow.
All right, let's do it. No. Well, first we've got a special guest. As promised a few weeks ago, we're going to have someone from Mashery on, and pleased to welcome Clay Loveless. And we're going to be talking a lot about APIs and how Mashery's opening up the web. But before we get there, Chris, you're back from London.
Yes, I left Dave there, and Joseph is gone.
He's
MIA,
drying out.
Yeah, yeah. So I was at Future Web Apps in London, and
FOA.
Yes.
Or do they say FAWA? I heard some weird pronunciation.
They haven't done the Australian version yet, but yeah. So it's a great conference run by Ryan Carson and his whole crew at Carsonified, and they do a really great job with speaker prep and stuff like that. They gave us like this little printed out booklet with not only like our times for talking and things like that, but like our flights.
Nice.
How great is that? Anyways, so yeah, I was there with Dave, and he and I did a workshop, actually on the OpenStack, as now we've christened this range of building block technologies, and that went over I think pretty well, sort of like at the high level, but was pretty good. And then I also gave a talk on OAuth for the win.
I saw that via Vidler.
Yep.
So one of the things we'll be doing is links to some of these talks.
Yeah, we got to link that stuff up, and kind of giving the broader overview of the flow, how it all works, and most importantly, trying to fight the password anti-pattern. People should not be treating passwords as confetti, throwing them into every single web service that comes up asking for those passwords. So
we're seeing that meme picked up by more and more folks.
Yeah, I hope so. So that was sort of an important thrust there. And then Dave talked about blowing up social networks, I think.
Blowing up social networks.
Hopefully in a positive, constructive way.
Actually, very cool presentation. Lots of castles and stuff like that.
All the different walled gardens and stuff. Yeah, so that's all out there. And
I also watched Fireside Chat with Mark Zuckerberg.
That's right. Yeah, Ryan Carson did a pretty interesting interview there. He sort of, Ryan asked the question, so Mark, Facebook, all about open, platform, yay, rah, 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 but what's the deal with supporting things like OpenID and OAuth? Like, why don't you sort of make it easier for developers to...
Yeah, he really asked the pointed question of a lot of the big players are using the same common open stack. Yeah. Why not Facebook?
I mean, is there really a benefit to your implementation here, or is there something that you can add to maybe these open projects? And the answer that he gave was pretty interesting. He said that, well, we're all about this open stuff. It's great. We're all about openness, people having their data and whatever. And then he said, well, we'd like to use this stuff more, but the usability, the user experience just isn't what we'd like to have. And I think that's a very, very interesting thing, because there has been a lot of research that's actually being done lately by folks at Google, Yahoo, MySpace, again, those large providers, trying to figure out, well, how can we make this stuff more usable? In fact, can we make it even better or more usable than what Facebook has today? And I think that it's a very, very tall order, but it's absolutely essential. In fact, Yahoo came out with this usability study that essentially made the point that, well, first of all, people don't know what OpenID is. Secondly, they get confused by it. And I don't think it's just OpenID's fault. I think accounts in general on the web are very confusing. And I think in general, if we can lower or reduce the number of passwords that people have to remember and use, then I think we can start actually moving things forward.
Well, and I think a lot of it too is it's any one of these building blocks can be a little bit difficult to implement, and implementing it in a way that's really consumer friendly is less about any one of them and more about them working together well. So how does OpenID and OAuth work well together, and how do we make that a consumer-ready user experience is obviously one of the most important topics for the tail end of this year. But the cool thing is all the big guys are investing in making that actually work. So
yeah, to that end, actually, we're having an OpenID usability summit this coming Monday, I think, where again, we're getting everybody together and trying to really hash out these issues. Now that we have real research that demonstrates where some of these problem areas are, we can go about addressing them. And in fact, design is actually one of my sort of original passions, and so that's something that, we can have as much portable data as you want, but if it's unusable or people can't actually get to their data and reuse it elsewhere, then what's the point?
It's actually great to see the shift now from how do we build the building blocks to how do we put them together to create compelling
so the conversation is definitely moving forward, I think.
All right. Other things happening. APIs are popping up all over. and they're popping up for big name mainstream media companies like the New York Times, MTV. Last week we had Netflix, a mainstream retail property, and we referenced a few weeks ago Best Buy. And as I see these various blog posts or press releases or news stories, I keep seeing the name of a company, Mashery. So we got to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, we've been pretty busy. It's been a great couple of months for us to roll out. We've got the New York Times just launched yesterday.
Wow.
We've got Best Buy and MTV have been out for a few weeks, and we've been getting a lot of action on the OAuth implementation with Netflix. So and we've got more to come. So stay tuned, as they would say in TV land.
So if not everyone's familiar with Mashery, it looks to me like you guys are literally building a business out of the world of providing APIs. Is that really a business?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's sort of evolved over time that a lot of developers that we talked to initially were skeptical that there was a business there, because everyone would say, oh, well, I'll just build that myself. But a lot of companies either are resource constrained and don't want to spend the time building things like member registration, user tracking, or reporting kinds of things. So yeah, we've really have spent. We like to say that we spend all the time doing the boring stuff so that you don't have to.
Right.
And so we take reporting. Everybody, every developer at some point has built some kind of reporting tool, but we've taken it 5 or 10 times past that to really build the things that the business users or the business sponsors of an API inside of a company want to see. That goes a lot further than just your basic, hey, I had 20 hits today. It's actually breaks it down into, our reporting will break it down into API method call usage, who your most active developers are in a particular time period, as well as what type of system load do those APIs give you, at least from our perspective, in terms of latency. How long does a particular API method take to return its content? So there's a lot there that gives insight, both from a business side and from a sort of a debugging side, that companies are really getting into.
What do you see as being some of the leading, I guess, reasons why companies are interested now in offering APIs? I mean, I think historically we've seen large companies, especially content companies, being very reluctant to let their data roam free, or for anybody else to have access to their data in a either structured or convenient way. So I mean, if you've got folks like the New York Times, MTV, those guys putting their data out there, wanting people to use it, I guess remix it maybe. What's driving that need now? What's sort of bringing their heads around to say, oh, this is a good idea?
Well, I think it's an interesting question, because I think that even inside some of these bigger companies, it's not necessarily the company as a whole thinks that. It may be a few torchbearers within who say, really
rogue elements.
Yeah, who and in fact
We like those guys.
Yeah,
those mavericks.
That's right. All right, yeah, right. The mavericks.
Drink. Sorry.
The guys who really push it forward are sometimes the APIs are sort of the closet projects that don't really have a lot of exposure until it's done, and then and what we can do is help make that happen faster, so that they can say, hey, let's have an API, work with Mashery, and the next thing you know, bam, we have one, as opposed to building out all these things that causes the development to take a lot longer. But what we found is that there's still a whole lot of companies. I mean, guys like us and folks who are watching this know about these things and are kind of hip to what's going on. But we're still the minority by far, and we've got our Business of APIs conference that is actually, we've got one coming up on November 3rd.
We'll provide a link to that.
Yep, and where we have people who've implemented APIs inside of a large company or in small companies, and those who have not, who are there to find out why they should, what are the benefits, what are the risks, and in every case, we found that companies who went ahead and did it were surprised by the response that they got to it, were surprised by the different ways the community would use the API. There's still a lot of people who are not sure that they should.
Yeah, interesting.
So I guess the ones that are the rogue elements who are pushing for this, presumably are seeing a world in which getting their stuff more broadly dispersed should lead to some combination of more usage and more traffic. Is that a fair assessment, or is there some other business driver to this?
I think that it's brand building in a lot of ways to get people's data, because in a lot of cases users of the APIs are grateful to have access to them, so they're not shy about promoting where the data is coming from. And so that's good to promote the brands of the data providers. But also you've got companies who are who take advantage of that and get it out there, and that sorry, I'm having a Sarah Palin moment right now. I'd like to use one of my lifelines. But it's
we can get back to us on that.
yeah, let me get back to you on
Let's
that.
switch to foreign policy. Well,
I saw Russia this morning, actually. It was
from
rearing
your,
its head.
from your bench.
Sorry.
Well, one thing that we can talk about is specifically one of the most recent ones is the Netflix API. And Joseph couldn't help himself over the weekend. He decided to get in there and get the code and actually write one of the first implementations. So we're going to have next week, we'll launch a Netflix feed into Plaxo Pulse. And here the business, it's really pretty straightforward, although I find the more people I talk to, this notion of a virtuous circle between media companies or any kind of mainstream company and social networks. These two actually can build each other's businesses. And so in this case, Joseph, who's a Netflix user, if his ratings get shared into Plaxo to his friends, I see that Joseph, whom I respect a lot, despite him being a crazy guy, has rated some movie that I've been curious about very highly. The odds are quite good that at a minimum I'm going to be interested in checking out the movie. If I'm also a Netflix subscriber, I should be able to click and add it to my queue. So this is a remote promotion, essentially, of Netflix stuff that is happening within the context of the social environment of network.
Context.
So that sort of engine of social discovery is, I think, one of the most powerful things that these APIs can open up.
Now, are you seeing any interesting areas of challenge where, again, new types of standardization or formats or things like that would maybe make the whole situation of either creating APIs or putting new data out there? I mean, because I imagine if you're dealing with all these different providers, content providers, many of them will have very similar types of, let's say, objects that they want to make available. So even in the case of Netflix, for example, you can imagine that Best Buy might have a similar rating system, or Amazon might have a similar rating system. And so if they're all pushing out similar types of data, Mashery in a way could help sort of usher forward certain standardization opportunities.
Yeah, that's true, and that's something that we've talked about a lot. It's as we get into a Mashery developer through any of our we call them a Mashery developer, but really it's like if you go and sign up at Best Buy or at MTV or at Netflix, those are single sign-on accounts that can participate in the developer forums of any of the other Mashery portals. And so I think that we're starting to see a lot of that sort of cross-pollination of how can these APIs be used together, but also more, particularly with the Netflix rollout with OAuth, but more and more adoption of those standards, and we're trying to, with our, Mashery now has with Netflix, we've got an off-the-shelf OAuth implementation. So, what we find is a lot of companies that we've talked to want to use OAuth, but they're so focused on getting their own APIs built and making sure that what they provide works, that adding on something that is admittedly daunting about the OAuth spec is just more than they can take on. So what we can do is help to drive that adoption forward by providing just that one piece to hook into their back end, and then the rest of the OAuth stuff, we've sort of figured that out. We've got a little roadmap for people to, here's the checklist of just the parts you have to do, and now you're OAuth compatible.
Yeah.
One of the things I like about this is it's almost like Mashery as a virtual platform, but
So
where
kind of
it's
like
using
Ning for
existing,
APIs.
And I was thinking about this. We really believe in a sea change going on, the web itself going social and the social web going open, and so I see Mashery as fitting in as a logical service layer to that. And And I'm very bullish. I believe that it's more like 93 right now than it is like 99, and that
Let's hope so.
this open stack, if we can get the user experience right, should allow any two people in a dorm or a garage to build the next killer social app.
Yeah.
And they'll be able to do that more quickly and more cheaply as a result of a bunch of different services. Mashery is an example of that. I think Jan Rain is doing that with OpenID, with their RPX. And GNIP is doing that, and S3. It's like the cost of getting into the game is going down by virtue of the economics of the open stack. So I think it's a very interesting time to be in Mashery's shoes.
Definitely. We're and the best part for us is that we get to see all of this fun stuff as it comes along, and so we get a little sneak peek of some of the APIs that are coming and the kinds of things, and we're just excited to see what's coming.
Cool. Well, I'm sure there's some interesting other big names that will be other shoes to drop, but since we're not a breaking news show, we can't tell you what they are. I actually don't know them.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
We probably will be keeping a close eye on some of these new APIs popping up all over the place, and we'll be reporting on applications that are being written to them as they go into the wild. So thanks. And this has been another exciting week. Please join us next week for another episode of The Social Web TV.